Total War is my favourite strategy franchise, as well as being some of the most meaningful and important pieces of media in my life. Much of my knowledge, interest, and passion for history, culture, and different societies stems from playing an absurd amount of campaigns, be it in Rome, medieval, empire, or shogun. They're both incredibly engaging, excellent video games, and informative products for the dozens of civilizations, kingdoms, empires, and warlords. I'm not alone in this praise. Each Total War game has built up its own legacy and following by offering what no other title can deliver: massive, full-scale battles and sweeping conquests between nations across the globe throughout history, from Caesar to Napoleon. It's also a franchise that's been so poorly handled by the developers of Creative Assembly and its publisher Sega in failed launches and infamous DLC practices, it's impressive it's still going and that I'll still buy them. While not the first, but arguably the most important, 2004's Rome Total War set the general template for what all Total War games have since followed. Starting around 270 BC, you pick one of the 11 factions and stake your claim at conquering the world, from Arabia all the way to the British Isles in whatever manner you decide. The game plays in two ways: turn-based strategy where you build cities, interact with other states, and train and move armies around, and then the real-time combat mode where armies clash in their thousands. How both systems were intertwined was brilliant, and the presentation and graphical capabilities were unmatched for the time, solidifying a strong following and a foundation for further improvements. More than a decade later, it is fairly dated, clunky, and bare bones in features, especially when compared to its sequels. However, it's perhaps the most accessible and complete of the series, with great compatibility on modern systems and no DLC shenanigans. For newcomers to the series who can accommodate the dated look, it's a great jumping off point to get into Total War, as it was for me. Aside from a tutorial, once you start the campaign, it's a very hands-off journey. There are no set characters nor cutscenes outside of the simple yet tonally effective introduction, which quickly summarize your people's history, conflicts, rivals, and objectives. Winning the campaign usually requires destroying a few factions, conquering Rome, and holding back 50 regions. Although there's 3 playable factions, you have to play through once as one of the 3 major Roman families, the Julii, Brutii, or Scipii, before the rest are unlocked. These span a mix of Hellenistic, Eastern, and tribal nations like Carthage, Gauls, Greece, and Parthia. There are some historical liberties taken for game balance, like Numidia or Britannia being around at this time, or how Greece is one faction instead of multiple city-states. This can be excused as the real focus is on the Roman campaign. It can be very overwhelming starting out, with few units, small cities, and plenty of larger states wanting a piece. However, the UI is easy to grasp. Moving people around on the overworld map is as simple as pointing and clicking. You're limited in how far one can go in a turn, though it varies between classes. A horseman can move further than heavy infantry, for instance. This control scheme is also how you attack, enter settlements, and interact with characters. Besides armies, there's special non-combat agents, such as diplomats who can make treaties, form alliances and pay bribes, spies who can recon an area and infiltrate an army or region, and assassins who can eliminate VIPs like generals. The more you use these guys, the higher their skill, enabling them to carry out greater tasks. Movement across turns can be a tedious process, as you keep directing and redirecting units to locations, often taking many turns as they get blocked or harassed before finally arriving. Along with moving your forces, managing your cities is an equally important task. This is essentially the base building component, as constructing barracks, stables, churches, aqueducts, academies, markets, roads, mines, and walls either boost your economy and defenses or unlock new units to recruit. It's initially slow moving at first, but it's not long before you're dealing with sprawling capitals whose taxes help fund the war effort. The only thing you need to be mindful of is the public order level. High taxes or a lack of garrison results in riots and even rebellions. This is easily avoided by just lowering taxes or enslaving half the population. The real problem comes in when conquering settlements that have a different culture than yours, as they have religious temples that you can't upgrade, so you have to take the public order hit by destroying and replacing them to ensure you can actually maintain it for the future. It's very obtuse micromanaging. It's still satisfying turning a small hamlet into a thriving centre of commerce and culture as you read up on the background of each building and enter a 3D mode of the city as people mill about. It gives off a very SimCity vibe. It's worth noting that certain cities contain ancient wonders that give your faction a major stat boost that can dramatically help you. Attacking armies and besieging cities just requires clicking on them and then deciding to enter combat or auto-resolving the battle. You do require siege engines to take down fortifications, which require at least a turn to produce. Otherwise, it's the same wherever you go. Aside from expansion, there is some household management like marriages, choosing your heir, and men reaching adulthood. Family members function as your army's generals and build up stats, be it from civic issues to winning battles. This is all done automatically, but it feels special building up a fresh-faced kid into a battle-hardened conqueror after dozens of turns. These mechanics may seem very basic, but the freedom and dynamism that Rome allows enables almost limitless options and playstyles to dominate your opponents. Expanding out quickly to secure resources and territory for quick growth also puts you in the crosshairs of land-hungry nations and being unable to defend or maintain your cities. Digging in, forming alliances, and recruiting a strong professional army can solidify your position at the cost of missing out on vulnerable opponents early on. While progression is non-linear, there are some scripted events and restrictions for the Roman factions. You have the Senate that demand you to carry out missions like taking settlements and ports, and prohibit you from declaring war at will. It's a smart way of preventing Rome from steamrolling the game too soon. You also have the plebeians, the general populace, who support you as you keep winning, to the Senate's chagrin. This culminates with your house becoming too popular and a civil war breaking out. This is both greatly thematic and a fine endgame challenge as you're pitted against massive armies and entrenched cities. If there's a problem here, it'd be the Senate missions are bullshit. They have you attack a port or a settlement that's on the other side of the map, or it's impossible to reach, and the rewards are pitiful. You're much better off increasing public support quickly than enter the civil war ASAP. Really simplifies things. If you're playing as the other factions, Rome quickly becomes a massive threat, as their manpower simply overwhelms yours. At roughly around 1/3 of a typical campaign length, the Marian reforms are triggered, upgrading all Roman units, making them pretty tough to bring down. I like this as it pushes you to keep developing your forces instead of getting cozy. It's still nowhere near as advanced as Crusader Kings or Europa Universalis, as the real-time strategy gameplay is the focus and payoff for all your constructive efforts. Once you load in, your general delivers a rousing speech for your men. This varies based on different conditions and attributes. They might recall how they've repeatedly won, or grimace at the overwhelming odds, and even throw insults at the enemy.
Do not fear these Germans. They may be good fighters, but they die just like other men.
It seems a bit more complex for the Roman factions, but the different accents for each nation is very impressive and always fun listening to. After this, you position out your troops in different formations, groups, and stances, then start the battle with the end goal of routing the enemies from the field. Just like the overworld portion, leading thousands of troops seems complicated, however it's very automized. You control a maximum of 20 units at once, each one containing numerous soldiers that work as one entity. They stick together and fight together regardless of what happens. Moving troops is easy and clear, though it would have been nice to zoom out with the camera further to get a proper bird's eye view. Attacking enemies is done via click as your troops race off into battle. Having them disengage and reform is fluid and invaluable for skirmishing and to protect your flanks. Otherwise, it's simply a breakdown of unit stats. Spearmen can knock off horsemen, heavy infantry can tear through lightly armoured troops, but are vulnerable to missile units like archers that can pick them off, who themselves are useless against cavalry. While there are no god units, there are special additions for each faction, like elephants, Spartans, berserkers, and Praetorian guards whose expenses are made up by their lethality. Siege battles work a little differently. You have to either take down your opponent or hold the central plaza for a period of time, King of the Hill style. There's numerous siege engines like rams, ladders, and towers, as well as units like catapults that remove the need to build anything. It's pretty much a grind fest as units smash into each other, and Total War has always struggled with pathfinding coordination during city battles, making them feel very rigid. Still, this rock, paper, scissors balance of movement and counters makes combat really fun as you grapple between classes on the fly while the battle ebbs and flows. You watch as troops clash in melee, get slammed by cavalry, or peppered by arrows. Yeah, models are basic and chunky looking, yet the scale and presentation is on point. The music swells from a hesitant drone to a crash of brass, vocals, drums, and horns. It's great. These two forms of gameplay coalesce into a rich and addictive experience where you plan out machinations against global rulers and tour the fields showered in glory and victory. There is, however, caveats to this praise. That is, Rome is an incredibly broken game whose exploitation is half the fun, but also makes the game incredibly easy. On the world stage, the AI is very dumb, especially in diplomacy and strategy. Factions will often form treaties with you, then attack in the same turn, and when they do attack, it's rarely with a consolidated force, typically a few units, or ones that can't even take settlements. You might dwarf them in military and economic might, but they'll still fight you regardless, with no sense of self-preservation. Good luck trying to create ceasefires or alliances, as even when crushed into single remaining cities, they'll keep fighting and make absurd demands, or they'll sue for peace immediately and offer one of their regions. What the fuck? You'll often see armies half your size trying to siege the same settlement, then get BTFO'd a dozen times in a row. What's more, there's a lack of defensiveness on their part. Major cities will be garrisoned by 2 units, allowing you to steamroll an entire empire in a few turns, or instantly kill the faction leader when he tries to go solo. This also carries on to how you fight battles. Most can just be auto-resolved after the halfway mark. That's about 90% of all conflicts, as no one bothers to build up a sizable counterforce. The same happens during the Roman Civil War, though to a lesser extent. You'd imagine capturing Rome would push the other households to muster their strength and recapture their homeland, but they never do. They'll just leave their ripe and powerful cities to be conquered. After all of this, you don't even have to fight, as you gain money ridiculously fast as long as you don't bloat your unit numbers. With enough money, you can buy and bribe settlements and entire armies, creating a snowball of overpowered units and regions. When you do actually get into a fight on equal footing, it's still just too easy to win. The AI doesn't understand how to use combined arms to properly flank you. Nearly all my fights are the same. Put the cavalry on one or both wings, move the infantry forward, then charge into their opposers' sides. They never develop a counter towards this. They're perfectly happy sending archers or infantry one at a time, or even their lone general, making easy pickings. On hard. Once you figure out the pattern, defending in a siege battle can all be won the same way. Get a unit of phalanx, position them at the gates, you win every time. While the AI just cannot use the phalanx formation without being easily flanked, when you do, even the hardest, most one-sided fight becomes a total slaughter as they charge forward and die, incapable of bypassing it. It looks gloriously stupid. Auto-resolving fights should fix some of these problems, except it doesn't destroy armies outright or kill generals, it just weakens them. So if you want to kill a military leader, you have to load into the battle and spend 5 minutes hacking away. It's needless. However, it's still more enjoyable than naval warfare, or lack thereof. Ship fighting is only automatic, it's purely a numbers game and very easy to win. Step 1, build a full fleet. Step 2, done. Enemies will rarely have stacks of ships and can't attack you whilst your boats are docked, so once your fleet is ready, you're safe for the entire campaign. Although, because of how auto battles work, you're forced to attack with dozens of ships against a crew of 12 multiple times before they sink. Now, all my haranguing might seem like the game doesn't hold up or it's woefully outdated, and from a surface level, it is. However, the presentation, mechanical freedom, and unit variety is unmatched in the series. If a plague hits your city, get one of your spies infected and have him enter your enemy's regions and watch biological warfare spread throughout their empire. If you take a settlement you clearly can't hold, just enact a scorched earth policy by leveling all their structures, guaranteeing you'll go into full rebellion once retaken. To increase population in your cities quickly, just enslave a few regions, because slaves count as people. For combat, each faction has different units, characteristics, skills, and strengths, so no one side is overpowered or boring, making a new campaign still fresh after dozens of hours. The custom battle mode showcases this, where you can min-max and recreate innumerable fights in a great, satisfying time sink, and a good way to push the engine to its limits. Now, I'm aware there are mods like Darth Mod that improve the AI capabilities somewhat, but I'm looking at the vanilla experience in this case. Fortunately, Creative Assembly was aware of these problems when releasing the Barbarian Invasion expansion pack. Set during the late Empire period and early Dark Ages, you lead either the divided Roman empires, their rivals, or the hordes of starving nomadic warlords like the Huns or Goths. This is a really solid way to cap off the game, as there are a slew of new units and abilities, and since factions have already established themselves, there's no waiting around or building. Mostly just all-out war from the get-go. The AI has been improved significantly, now flanking units, skirmishing your lines, and being generally more aggressive as they are on the world map, making the Western Roman Empire an extremely challenging faction to play. Since it's nearly always included in most versions of the game, there's no reason to not check it out at least. There's also the Alexander campaign, but this video's gone on way too long. And so it brings to conclusion Rome Total War. It's a PC and strategy classic that's still beloved and played and modded by thousands of fans for nearly 2 decades. It's a very pure, player-driven saga that's been a source of inspiration for other great franchises. With it running smoothly, an active fanbase, and at dirt cheap prices, Rome Total War still makes an excellent addition to anyone's library and an easy gateway to the incredible Total War series.